You're listening to Mr. Radio, and I'm your host, Marshall. Imagine waking up so groggy that you can barely make your morning coffee when all of a sudden an apparition dressed in a gaudy outfit appears on your living room couch and commences to organize the rest of your life. Well, that apparition is Aurora, and she's come to counsel Helen, a robustly healthy 72-year-old, who will soon realize that she has a lot to learn from Aurora, who for the next few weeks will be her guardian godmother guide to the happiness of organization. Such is the creative plot to a book written by today's guest, who is also a publisher at Savor Europe, a magazine for travelers planning to make Europe their home for 3 to 6 months a year, a writer of narrative nonfiction, as well as since 2007 the chief executive officer of Your Health Span. Aurora and Helen are characters from the book Live Life Fully, and it is my pleasure to welcome the book's author, Jill Burk, to our show. Welcome to the show, Jill.
Marshall, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
I could certainly relate to your character, Helen, desperately needing a cup of coffee before dealing with anything else in the morning. I'm certainly that person. But Aurora, how did you come up with that character?
So it was started out actually when in the writing process, just being a book of lists. Because with my work with HealthSpan, I talked to a lot of women who ended up in a care home, and they needed some massage therapy, or they needed other help. And as I talked to them, the lists of things they wished they had with them, or the wish they'd done, or the things they wished they communicated earlier in the process stuck with me. And so I started writing a book of lists, and it just honestly, Marshall, bored the crap out of me. It was during the pandemic when I was writing this, and it just was boring. And so Aurora just sort of popped into my head as sort of the person I wish I had in my life, I guess. And she's a bit of a cross with my mom, who's also a very big organizer. And yeah, that's where she came from. Is just everything should be fun.
She presents Helen with all kinds of things to do, and one of the things is the online world and assets that are in the online world that Helen needs to consider in this world. I really was surprised at some of those things that one should consider, but I think they should be considered. And could you explain what those online assets are that people should think about?
Sure. So, for instance, my books are online. They're sold through Amazon, and that's an asset that could be worth something. Things like blogs or your radio show is an online asset, really. It wouldn't be considered in a normal kind of situation where one was dividing up the things that you have. But yet it is part of what brings in money. The radio show will live online potentially forever. And so how it's managed and what's done with it is important. Also, for people who have maybe a bigger than life presence, I was actually just reading today about a musician whose work is being turned into an AI sort of something. I didn't quite understand it, to be honest. And his family is fighting against that because they don't wish it to happen. And it occurs to me that as we go into this kind of strange new world, that all these things like our Facebook pages and our Twitter accounts and anything that, whether it's monetized or not, that lives online, does need to be a future plan needs to be figured out what to do with it, so it doesn't end up being used in a way you do not want or your family doesn't want.
And I agree with you. Once it's on the internet, it's probably on there forever, which is a scary thought. But one thing that you did suggest to Helen via Aurora was to use an online lawyer for writing wills and other documents. Is that a safe thing to do?
It might depend a little bit on how complicated your assets are, and also whether whether or not it's a reputable company. But it does give you, and especially if it's a first draft or you're not quite sure, it's a like my son, for instance, had to get one done. He's got a little child. It's a great place to start. And usually it's safe. If your family is likely to be contentious about how things are divided, you really do need to see a lawyer in person. But if everything is fairly straightforward, it is a safe way to do it.
From the legal to the more, well, actually, legal is practical, but one of the practical things that you suggested via or Aurora was the go bag. Can you explain the go bag?
I love the go bag. I don't know if you've ever ended up suddenly in the hospital. I hope not, but it happens to most people in their lives. It happened to me when I was about 45, and my husband my husband had to bring me stuff, and I really wanted earphones, and for some reason it was just impossible for him to figure that out. He couldn't find them. He brought the wrong ones. My daughter ended up jumping in. But a go bag is simply a bag that would have all of the things that you would need if you suddenly had to leave and you were in the hospital particularly or on a journey. And it would contain things like granola bars. Often if you do end up in the hospital, you end up in the waiting room for a very long time before you end up, processed into a hospital bed. Especially where we are in Canada, it just could take a little while. We have a great healthcare system, but that is maybe a fault, or the doctor's checking you out or whatever. And if you're waiting for 4 or 5 hours to get somebody to figure out what's wrong with you, you're going to end up hungry and you might end up cold and you'll probably be bored and you might be uncomfortable. So the go bag has things like granola bars, a bottle of water, an extra toothbrush, and a scarf in it. The things that you would want to keep yourself comfortable if you were in a waiting room for 4 or 5 hours. And it would be easy enough that even if you had to call someone to help you, they could pick it up and scoop it into the car or the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
You mentioned being in the hospital in Canada, and I found that some of the things, which I'll get into a little later, are particular to living in Canada. So I just want listeners to realize that if you're not living in Canada and listening to this, some of these things may not work for you. But one thing that I'm sure everyone can find is the automatic pill dispenser. That, I thought I was tech savvy, but I really never heard of an automatic. I've heard of automatic pill dispensers, but not the kind that you described. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Honestly, it was like so many things in life, right? Solving a problem. A friend of mine was saying that her mom had been taken to the hospital, and it was because she hadn't taken her pills for a week. She'd forgotten about them, and you forget about them a couple of days, and all the problems get worse, and then you're more likely to forget. So the automatic pill dispensers set off an alarm that you have to, turn off, and they dispense the pills as you need to take them. And so the pills are there, the alarm's going off, and it just reminds you, first of all, to take your pills. And it dispenses the ones you absolutely need at that moment, which is pretty fantastic.
I guess I should have been aware of that because I knew that they have automatic pet feeders for dogs
Right?
and cats. So why not for adults? Self-care. You have Aurora tell Helen that she needs to have daily acts of self-care, and she calls them the little rituals of Helen's happiness. Can you explain that, self-care?
Probably because my background is massage therapy, I'm a big believer in taking care. But it is those moments, like that coffee in the morning, the moments where we stop, we pause, we regroup, that and we check in with ourselves that are so important. And it's lovely to just light a candle for yourself and have a cup of tea in the afternoon. And often, probably everybody, but I think we assume that women do this more than men. We're busy taking care of everybody else or responding to everything else that happens in life. And we don't very often, it's harder to take the pause and say, this is my 15 minutes to not just take care of the necessities, not just to feed yourself or do whatever. This is my 15 minutes to just enjoy a moment. And I love those moments.
How do you go about doing that yourself?
Oh, oh, I often will put on a meditation on my iPad or my phone. And I have a chair in my room under the light by my plants that I will sit in, and I will turn off everything, and I will put on a meditation or a guided imagery, and I will just relax for and I will do one right after this. I do them a couple of times a day when I change from one group of tasks to another, just as a way to reset.
Now, as I mentioned, there's some things that I did not agree with in your book, and one of them was that Aurora suggested that Helen ask her family, her sons and daughters, to help her around the house. And I just remember my mother asking me to drive to her house to change a light bulb. So that, I know I was probably not a good son, but that is one of your suggestions.
And it's funny because my brother also has great boundaries around those types of requests. I think more it is making sure that people are in tune with what needs to be done. And you're right, driving over to change a light bulb is maybe not a good use of the time, but making sure that somebody is stopping by. And it doesn't have to, in my parents' case, they have a friend from their church that goes by once every couple of weeks and just make sure all those little things that are not quite safe for them to do get done. And you're right, like driving over to change a light bulb, depending on how far you live, is maybe a stretch. My parents are 3 hours away, so if I had to drive over and change a light bulb, it would be a wait.
But I do agree that it is a good thing to do, to check in on people, even if they're not part of your family.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a village, right, to really live any kind of life.
One thing that made me want to perhaps live in Canada, I don't think they have this here. You mentioned that Alberta, I don't know if everywhere, this is true everywhere, but in Alberta, they offer a tax relief available to help you get your house to a point where you can safely age in place, even if your mobility, eyesight, or memory are not as good as they once were. Again, this is a wonderful concept. I'm not sure it's available in the United States.
So we have a couple things. So if you're at home, there will be a nurse or somebody that will stop by as often as necessary. For my mother-in-law, she had somebody come by twice a week. And then when she needed nursing, somebody came every day so that she could stay at home. And that was provided by the government. But then, yeah, there are both tax reliefs and actually monetary grants. So if you need to get a ramp put in, there will be money available to put the ramp in so that people can stay in their homes rather than being, a burden on the healthcare system. But also you're happier, I think, most people in a place you're comfortable and you've lived a long time. It's not always for everybody to move into a group living situation.
For people listening in Canada, what is the paperwork? What do you have to do in order to
just go on to your provincial government website and just put in grants for aging in place. And both the federal grants and the provincial grants should come up. Just make sure it's a link to your actual government and it's not, an in-between person. Go straight to the government site. Yeah. Like everything.
Back to Aurora, my favorite character.
Isn't she great?
How did you come up with her wardrobe? I mean, at one point she's in a gown, and at another point she's in a jogging outfit.
Right? I don't know. I just honestly, I maybe I was channeling a little bit of my inner me. I kind of like to wear different things, but I don't know how anybody writes. It's like creating from nowhere. It's such a fun experience, but I really had fun with Aurora.
Was this the first book that you've written, or have you written?
That was my first book.
Your first book?
Yeah.
We'll get back to it, but where else have you gone with your writing career?
So since then, I wrote a book for wellness professionals called Financial Health for Wellness Pros, and it's not nearly as fun because it's a real person kind of guiding you through. And then with the same co-author from that book, I've written a book for first-time landlords on how to navigate buying property and getting tenants, and that's probably going to be a series of 3. And then that's where I've been with writing lately. I would like to write some fiction, but I haven't. I've got, I've got a few projects on the go that are really fun and exciting and creative. So I'm sidelined from writing temporarily.
It sounds like the COVID pandemic, I like to call it the plague, got you started on the writing.
Honestly, I know everybody has a different experience with COVID, but I loved it so much. I just had the best time. I mean, we broke protocol a little bit. I saw my parents and my daughter and my brother, who all live very close to here. But other than that, I just saw my husband, who I really like, and I liked not having people that were wanting me to do things. I really loved COVID.
I want to get back to Aurora. The
Okay.
recipe book. The recipe book.
Yeah.
I really like the recipe book. Can you explain what's involved in
Yeah.
putting together a recipe book?
Like for me, I my love language, as such as it is cooking for the people that I love. I like to make. When I want to express that I love you, I will make you food. And I'm a very good cook. And so as a result, and my mom's a good cook, my grandmother was a good cook, and we have all these kind of family recipes, and it would be such a shame if they went missing. And there's just a lovely thing about being able to pull out the family recipe book and make something that speaks to you from your childhood. And so that's where that came from.
To round out your book, the last chapter, or day 29, I found that pretty intense. The goodbye. What is the goodbye?
Oh, like the telling people how you love them. Yeah, it is. I think this is a factor of oh boy, my children lost their mother when they were very young, and I wish that they had that, something from her that they could look back on later that expressed what her emotions were for them. And to me, that's just what I'd like to leave for them as they, as they lose me and their dad or whatever as time goes on. Just having something that you can hold on to that expresses that emotion. Obviously, I find it intense.
Yes, yes. For anyone who would like to get a copy of the book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Live Life Fully by Jill Burk on Amazon.
And in addition to your book, you also, correct me if I mispronounced it, Savor Europe magazine?
Yeah. So earlier this year, I actually, part of a different project, reached out to this company called Magcast because I wanted to I wanted to control a marketing message in a different way than what I was doing previously. And I thought, I'm a bit of a type A. I like to control how things unfold. I thought, gosh, I should just launch my own magazine. And so I got in contact with Magcast, and now I'm actually the outreach director for Magcast. And when I was talking to them about the magazine, I originally wanted to do, Damien, who's one of the partners, said to me, "That's a little bit boring, Jill. Come up with something more fun."
What was the boring concept?
Well, I still want to do it. So I really want to, but it was a wellness professionals magazine, like something that would help people develop their practice. But in conjunction with my hope, which is to live in Europe for part of the year, and my husband's, getting ready to retire, and I'm looking at a different change, I thought, gosh, this would be a great place to start. So it's basically a magazine that will help people navigate what it looks like to live in Europe for 2 to 3 or 6 months a year. Um, Depending where you come from, I think it's a little bit harder to do it for more than 90 days as an American citizen. I In lots of Europe, they restrict that to 90 days, but still 3 months is a long time. It's long enough to rent an apartment, to have a favorite restaurant, to make some friends with your neighbors. So it's a guide to that kind of living.
And how about your health span? What do you do there?
So we are a mobile massage company, and we go to people's homes and hotels and do massage therapy. So that is one of the things that's kind of wrapping up in my world, because because I'd like to be away. It's hard to be away and touch people.
Not to mention you probably have a lot of gear that you have to carry up and downstairs.
Oh, it is. It's a 50-pound table, which gets heavier every year. But honestly, we've been so blessed with our hotel partners with that, with the therapist I work with. It's really, and the clients are lovely. So it's pretty good.
You asked me to ask you, so I'm going to ask you, how do you publish a magazine without driving yourself to drink?
And let me just clarify that. There's nothing wrong with drinking. A glass of wine every once in a while is a perfectly good thing. But the way we do it through Magcast is we teach you to find partners that already have content that's out in the universe that they might want to have more people see. So just like I'd like to have people actually, read my book, there's lots of bloggers out there that have written great content about whatever your subject matter might be, that would love to partner and see their article in a magazine where it has beautiful pictures and a really good layout, and that then sends people back to their blog or their YouTube channel or however it is that they're communicating. So we teach people how to find partners that are going to enhance what they're doing.
This is not a hard copy magazine. This is an online magazine.
Yeah. So it's available iOS, Google Play, and through the Magcast platform.
What kind of skills do you need in order to do something like that? Well, first of all, you need an idea that's not boring, right?
Right. And honestly, if people decide they'd like to publish a magazine, we take them through a 5-day, we call it a bobsled run, where we train them in all those things, but we also give them lots of one-on-one. Truly, it is a way to launch a business that is very unique and can be profitable very quickly. Basically, the bobsled run will teach you all the things that you need to know to do that, to launch your business. And they make it really easy. And then they also do one-on-one. So Damien, as I said, will tell you if he thinks you're boring and help you really narrow down on a niche that has an audience, and help you figure out how to communicate to the audience that your magazine is there, so that when you launch, you'll have a built-in community right around your magazine. It's honestly, when I talked to them to start with, I had just a germ of idea in my head, but I loved them so much and the process that they go through with Magcast so much that I asked them if I could come and work for them. It's such a great way to launch a business.
Now, when I think of a magazine, I think of not only the text and stories, but graphics. So someone who wants to do this, do they have to be knowledgeable about how to create graphics?
So 99% of our publishers have never done anything. They've never published, they've never written, they've never done any of that before. We have a company that is in the Philippines that will help with design and layout, and they're doing an absolutely spectacular job of design and layout. And they'll help you design your cover, they'll do all of that stuff. So if you don't, I mean, if you are super talented at it, have at her. But most of us are not. I can use Canva, but when I use Canva, it's probably not much better than a sixth grader using Canva. It doesn't look polished and professional, and it looks like a grade school project. So we do have a partner company that will bridge all of those gaps for you.
Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the program, but before we leave, if somebody wanted to, if someone had an interest for a creative magazine project, where would they go? They
can email me directly, or they can go to magcast.net, and there will be a choice of days there. And we do once a month, we do a little information webinar that will give you the highlights of what it is. The webinars are not long, and we're not like hard salespeople. We are good at trying to find out if your idea has value and if we can provide you the support that you need to launch it. That's what that is about. So magcast.net.
And you said they can email you. What is your email address?
So my email is jburk@magcast.co.
Very good. Hopefully you will be getting some people who have creative ideas and want to publish a magazine.
And I'm so curious to hear them. So even if they think it might not be a great idea, I'd love it if they emailed me, because I'd love to hear what their ideas are. And if we can expound on them and make them great, then I'd love for that to happen.
Jill, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope to hear from you again real soon.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Mr. Radio, and I'm your host, Marshall. This program was written and produced by Marshall. Our theme music was played by Ululation. Mr. Radio is available wherever you get your podcasts, including iTunes and Spotify. Subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. And don't forget to tune in next week for another episode of Mr. Radio.